Hello, Ahorja. Welcome to Stories, Legends and Wonders of Aran. Aran is also known as Inis Mór, the largest of the three Aran Islands. I'm Diarmuid Dhiarmada Ghra.
Now today I'm bringing you to see Leaba Dhiarmada Gráinne. You see it there on the sign below Temple on Aran, which was the last video I did. So Leaba Dhiarmada Gráinne, that's Dermot and Gráinne's bed, and it's where they slept one night only while they were escaping from Fionn McCool and Cormac McGart. I'll tell you that story when we get there, but just to remind you of how to get this far, we're on the main upper road between Kilronan and Dunangus, the high road, and halfway across we pass through Ochil and the Catholic Church, and then they get onto this junction and you'll see the sign at the junction and take a left there. So now we're going to head up this road, and it's quite a distance up, so I'll guide you along so you don't get lost. So now we're passing through past a few houses, and here on the right is the stile you'd have to step over to go and see the temple, the Aran. So don't do that unless you want to visit the Aran, which we visited in the last video. It's across the fields there. But now we head on up and we go up past all the houses. Now we're 3/4 way up the hill, and we have passed a small gate on the right hand side, and that's your queue. Walk just past the gate and then look over the wall on your right, as I'm going to do now, and you'll see in the field the remains of a beehive hut. So this beehive hut was part of the monastery of Aran, that's what we believe. And you can see it's built in a sort of an oval shape with a good pile of stones up to waist height all around it. And those stones would have continued using a form of building called corbelling, which meant each layer of stones that you put down you brought closer into the centre, so that eventually the two sides met and you formed a roof on the top. So the whole building is made of stone. That's one of the reasons it's called Clochan. But probably a monk lived there, or maybe even a few monks, or maybe it could have been a guest house for the guests that arrived. We don't know. There are many more Clochans all over the island, but most of them are in much poorer shape than this one. So this is a good example of one that's sort of half there. There are 3 on the island that are sort of fully there. And particularly we'll see later when I get to that place to video it for you, we'll see a fully built Clochan that has not been damaged in any way or rebuilt in any way since the 9th century. It's quite amazing that it has survived all that long. Those stones that you see in there are loose stones, so any farmer over the hundreds of years could have decided he needed those stones to build a wall or to build a house or whatever else he wanted to do, and could just have removed them. It would be as easy as that, and yet nobody has ever done it, and we have it here today, and it's now protected as a national monument. You wouldn't be allowed to take it apart now, and hopefully it never will be. Now we have reached the top of the hill, more or less, and come to a level part of the road, and we're now going to take a turn right, so don't miss this turn right. Otherwise you'll start heading downhill again towards the cliffs. So here's the turn right. And we're going to head up here. This is a narrower path. It's really only a footpath that would be used for animals and for humans. No room for a tractor or a trailer or a cart or anything like that now. But we're going to go up here for a bit and then I'll show you what we do next. This Dolmen it is, the Bed of Dermot Gráinne is a dolmen. It's in a quite a remote place, and many islanders here don't know where it is at all because it's so remote. But I'm bringing you to it today, and it's a little secret that you can own. Now I've brought you along the track until we get to the brow of the hill where the track starts to go downhill again. And you can see the vista in front of you. You can see Kilmervey Bay, and then over to the left, if we look over, you can just about see the shape of Dún Aengus there in the mist. And bring your eyes closer now to the wall in front of us. You see a gap in the wall. We're going to go through that gap to get to the ring, to get to the dolmen. Now we're going to go across the field, staying at the same level on the hill, and we're going to go through that gap in front of us there and then turn right. And by the way, for those of you who are going to try this yourselves, you need to be sort of fit and well to be able to do this. It's not for the faint-hearted. The ground is quite rough. You may have to actually cross a wall, and if you do, please don't knock it down. And if you do knock anything off the wall, repair it. And just be careful. We don't want you having an accident or twisting an ankle or anything like that up here. It would be very hard to get rescue group to you, and it wouldn't do you any good at all. So assess yourself whether you're up for this or not. And when you've got this far, you can actually see the dolmen over on your right. So you may not want to actually go any further. Let me just show it to you if I can focus in on it here. There it is there. So now you've seen it, and if you're up for it, go over through the gaps in the wall and so on to actually get to it. But if you're not up for it, maybe you've come far enough. I've come through the gap now and I've turned right, and over in the distance you can see Dún Aengus. But here in front of me on my left you can see a very large boulder. It's actually made of granite, whereas it's sitting on limestone. The whole island is limestone. The walls are all limestone. So what's a piece of granite sitting in the middle of it all on top? Well, the reason is that it was dropped here during the Ice Age. When the ice began to melt, all sorts of things dropped out of it. And this is evidence that we did have ice here at one stage, and that this stone here was probably carried across to the island from Connemara, where there is granite, and was dropped here and left here. And of course the legend is that there was a very large giant living in Connemara who didn't like the giant who was living here on Inis Mór, and they started to throw stones at one another. So this is one of the boulders sent to try and eliminate the giant of Inis Mór. I don't know if he succeeded. So now we can see the dolmen there in front of us, but we still have to get over this wall here directly in front of me. And when I'm here today, there's a piece of it already knocked in front of me, so I'm going to use that to get through. But that may not be the case when you come. Anywhere along this wall could be the best place to throw your leg over. So please do it carefully. Don't hurt yourself. And if any stone comes down off the wall, please replace it. Leave it the way you found it. Or else decide you're not going to go any further. That's another option. So make up your mind. Don't do any damage to yourself or to the wall. So I've managed to get down over that wall and come across a little bit of a field. And now I'm heading up again through the last gap. And that will bring me into the dolmen. So we have arrived at the dolmen. Let me walk around it with you now. So this is called Leaba Dhiarmada Ghráinne. You can see it's a wedge-shaped tomb. That's a particular type of dolmen made deliberately in a wedge shape, so like a wedge of cheese, with two walls of stone on either side, and then a roof of stone stretching across the top, and very shallow at the east end to your right in the picture, and quite high at the west end to to the left of your picture. So we come round now to the front. This dolmen has been here for at least 3,000 years and maybe 5,000 years. Nobody has ever excavated it to find any evidence of dating or DNA or anything like that, carbon dating, so we only can guess. But it's built, as you can see, on a height overlooking an amazing view of the whole western side of Inis Mór and Connemara and the Bay of Kilmurvey and then Dunangus, and then back out the far side to the Atlantic Ocean and the setting sun, and a beautiful golden road being laid on the sea there by the setting sun. The golden road, which is the road that brings you to the promised land, to Tirnanog. And maybe when the people were building this dolmen, they deliberately had it facing west to represent that journey that the dead were had to make to the promised land, heading west across the sea. This dolmen would have been closed up with a stone across the front, a bit like the tomb of Jesus, maybe, as recounted in the Gospels. And it probably would have been covered with soil as well, so it was just like a mound. And every time a high status person within the tribe died, the chieftain maybe, or somebody important in the tribe died, their body would be allowed to decompose for about a year, and then their bones would be put in here along with the bones of the rest of the ancestors. So this was the place to come to celebrate the ancestors, and to, you know, ancestry was hugely important in Celtic society because tribes were generally named after one person. So they were the tribe of Conal, or the tribe of Owen, or in my case the tribe of Moilia. So all our surnames come from this early tribal society. So we're all kin, we're all related in our DNA, and this dolmen represents all our ancestors. So a very important place, and a place where people would have gathered at certain times of the year, perhaps particularly Samhain, Halloween, to celebrate the dead and to maybe pray for them, or whatever one did. So the only other thing about this dolmen now that I want to tell you about is the story of Dermot and Gráinne. So settle yourself down while I tell you that. So Dermot was a soldier in the army of the Fianna, and the great warrior Fionn McCool was the leader of that army. And Fionn McCool had married Sive and had had a child, Oisín, who was now growing up. But Sive was a person that had shape-shifted through this world into another world and back again. And Fionn at a certain stage had lost her back to the forest where she had become a deer, and he never found her again. But he had the son Oisín to rear, which he did rear, and Oisín became one of the soldiers in his army. But he's very lonely. Fionn is very lonely and needs a bride, and he's chatting away to the king, who's Cormac MacArt. And Cormac says, well, I do have one daughter who hasn't married yet. She'd be a lot younger than you, but maybe she'd marry you. So the word was put out to Gráinne, the daughter of the king who wasn't married, to see if she'd agree to marry Fionn McCool. And to everybody's surprise, she said she would. Now, she hadn't really known Fionn McCool that well, but like today, if a young lady was asked would she marry a celebrity, she might be very attracted to the idea. Somebody with such high status and such power and such authority within the tribe. So she agreed to marry him anyway, and there was a betrothal ceremony. And during the betrothal ceremony, Gráinne got a very close-up look at Fionn McCool and realised that he was the same age as her father, and that he was badly sort of scarred by all the battles and fights he'd been in. He didn't look great, like he'd lost his handsomeness. And she more or less said to herself, without telling anybody else, there's no way I'm going to marry this fella. And she had already had her eye and one of the young soldiers, the same age as Oisín, Fion's son. In fact, he was a friend of Oisín's. This was Diarmuid. She decided, he's the man I want to marry, but how am I going to get out of this now? So she consulted her druidesses, and they gave her a potion and said, we'll put this potion into a chalice and you offer it to each member of the high table at this betrothal party, and they'll all fall asleep. So she did that. They all fell asleep, and she made her escape with Diarmuid. Now, Diarmuid didn't want to go, and he knew if he went that he was going to be caught by Fionn McCool and he'd be put to death. That would be the end of it. So he was very frightened. But Gráinne had put a geis on him, and a geis is a sort of a spell. It's something which, once you have it on you, you cannot not do it, because it would be disaster for you and your life. So Oisín says to Diarmuid, look, you're going to have to go because she's put a geis on you. You've no alternative now but to go with her and see what happens. So they head off and they meet along the way. They steal some horses from the king's horse stables, and they make off on the horses. And they get to the River Shannon, and they're crossing the River Shannon when they meet the god of young people and love, god of Angus is his name, Angus Og. And he's sitting down and he says, now you need a bit of advice from me. You're going to be chased by Fionn McCool and by Cormac MacArt and by his army, and you're going to be caught unless you keep moving. So here's my advice to you. Never stay more than one night in any place. And wherever you choose to stay, make sure there's more than one entrance. If it's a house, that there's a back door as well as a front door. If it's an island, that there's more than one harbour. So he gave them their blessing and off they went, and that's what they did. And so they ended up travelling all over Ireland. And they ended up out here on Inis Mór, where we do have more than one harbour. We have Kilronan and Killaney, and we also have Kilmurvey, so they have plenty of harbours. And they slept here in this Dolmen, and since then it's been known as the Bed of Dermot Gráinne. They also slept in a similar dolmen on Inishmaan, the middle island, which is also called the Bed of Dermot Gráinne. And you can trace their journey all through Ireland, mostly in dolmens, which are called as their beds where they slept. So that's really another function of the dolmens nowadays in our mythology, to represent where Dermot and Gráinne slept. Now, according to the story, you can read this up for yourselves. I'm going to summarise the rest of it. They were chased for 16 years, sleeping in a different place every night. Imagine, because Fionn McCool was so angry and his pride was so hurt that he had been rejected by this beautiful young woman, and he couldn't get it out of his mind. He needed revenge. But eventually, Angus, the god of love, sat himself and the king down and said, look, this thing has gone on too long, you need to call it a day. And they agreed to a truce, and Gráinne and Diarmuid were allowed to settle down, where they had 4 boys and reared a family in County Sligo, in a place called Gráinne. You can find it today in Sligo, where they lived. And the boys grew up, and eventually Gráinne said, now it's time to reconcile with my dad, and perhaps with Fionn McCool as well. So she invited them over to her house to stay for a month, and they did all the usual things that one does. They went out fishing and they went hunting and all those things. And while they were hunting one day, Diarmuid managed to catch the wild boar of Ben Bulben. He got on the back of the boar, and the two of them raced down the hill with him on the back of the boar. When they got to the bottom, Diarmuid fell off and the boar gored him with his horn. And Diarmuid was dying, but Diarmuid also had stabbed the boar with his knife, and the boar was dying too. The two of them were dying side by side. And Fionn McCool came up upon them, and he had healing power in his hands, which he got from the time that he ate the salmon of knowledge and put the thumb in his mouth and got all the wisdom of the world. So he had healing in his hands, and Diarmuid said to him, just go and get some water for me, and that might heal me or keep me alive. And Fionn went off to get the water from a stream or a well, and each time he got back to Diarmuid, the water had slipped through his hands. There was nothing left. So he did it a third time, and this time he had enough water to give to Diarmuid to drink, but Diarmuid had died. And there was terrible, terrible tragedy, and it caused awful pain to the visit and the holiday and everything. Everything was disaster, and everything turned black. And the 4 sons of Diarmuid and Gráinne blamed Fionn for not bringing the water to heal Diarmuid, and felt that he was just revenge for everything that Diarmuid had done, stealing Gráinne from him, and the whole thing fell apart, the relationships fell apart again. And Gráinne is now left on her own as a widow with her 4 oldest sons. And what does she do? She goes back to Tara because she's on her own. And she hangs around in Tara because at least she has company there. And doesn't Fionn McCool fall back in love with her? And eventually she agrees to marry him. So she eventually marries the man she had jilted ages and ages ago. And that prevented a war between Dermot's family. The 4 boys were set on going to war against Fionn McCool because he had killed their dad. It put an end to that threat of war and it brought peace to the land. So that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk again.
These stories and all the other stories that are that are to be found on the Aran Islands can be found in my book Pocket Guide to Aran, Legends in the Landscape, and that's available from our website www.ashlingpublications.com, with Aisling spelt AISLING, so ashlingpublications.com. We have some other books here too, published by our own publishing company, ashlingpublications.com. And the first one up there is Young at Heart, Tools for Psychological Hygiene, written by Tess Harper Malloy. That's my wife. And she has been a Jungian student all her life and has studied the application of Jungian ideas to personality types. We've had plenty of personalities coming through our house all our lives, so she's had plenty of material to work on. And she introduces you to all the basic ideas of Carl Jung around your personality, introvert, extrovert, your shadow, your animus, your anima, all those key ideas which came from Carl Jung. She explains them all and introduced you to sort of practical examples of how they're applied. So a very useful book if you're into the psychology of Carl Jung. The other book there is Reimagining the Divine and a Celtic Spirituality of Experience. That's my latest book. And it's a sort of introducing you to the whole Celtic tradition, where spirituality is about going out into nature and experiencing the divine in nature. So it's very different from the more sort of popular religions that are around today, who all emphasize your creed and what you think and what you believe. This Celtic spiritual tradition emphasizes what you experience and invites you to get out there and experience the divine in all the wonder and magic and mystery of nature. So that's my latest book. And then there's one other book that I'd like to introduce you to, and that's my wife's latest book called Inis Mór, Poems and Images of Aran, written by Tess Harper Malloy. And that's Tess's collection of photographs she's taken over the last 40 years on Inis Mór, and linking them to poetry she's written about Inis Mór over that same period. So it's a lovely book of poetry and photographs published on very high quality paper, so you get a really nice image and lovely feel to the book. It's the sort of book that you put on your coffee table, and the sort of book that you maybe don't read from beginning to end, although you could. It's more that you dip into. It's a very enjoyable book and I highly recommend it. So all of these books are available on our website, ashlingpublications.com, and you'll also find them on other platforms.